Hello and welcome to the Daily Space. We've got a full house today. I'm your host, Dr. Pamela Gay.
I'm your host, Eric Mattis.
I'm Annie Wilson.
And I'm Gordon Dewis.
Most weekdays, the CosmoQuest team is here putting science in your brain. Today, however, is for Rocket Roundup.
Our first launch this week is a Kuaizhou Alpha launched from Chen on December 15th at 200 hours UTC with 2 commercial satellites. Unfortunately, they never made it to orbit because the rocket failed during the third stage burn for unknown reasons. Even though no launch photos or video were released by Chinese media, we still thought it was worth a mention. And now to the rest of the show.
Next, on December 18th at 0441 UTC, the Starlink 33 mission launched atop Falcon 9 booster 1051 from Slick 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Let's watch the launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9. Go Starlink.
Pushing down range.
This was the record 11th flight for Booster 1051, which successfully landed on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You. Both fairings on this launch were reused, with one on its third flight and the other on its fourth. This launch targeted the 53.2 degree inclination shell of the Starlink constellation. Because it launched from Vandenberg to that inclination, it could only carry 52 satellites into orbit instead of the usual 53. Normally, it would have launched from the East Coast from 39A or SpaceX Slick 40 in Florida, but they were both tied up with 2 more end-of-year missions for SpaceX, Cirrus 24 and Turksat 5B. The trajectory for this launch was unusual because it flew over land directly after liftoff, instead of going over the ocean and then landing. Rockets launched from the US typically don't fly over land, but Vandenberg is limited to 56-degree inclination orbits at minimum. So 53 degrees required hugging the coast as much as possible, going over the land south of Lombok, and bending the trajectory even more eastward during second stage burn. The second stage completed a deorbit burn on its second orbit, burning up harmlessly in the South Pacific Ocean.
Next up, on December 19th at 3:58 UTC, a SpaceX Falcon 9 launched the Turksat 5 Bravo satellite into geostationary transfer orbit from 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Let's watch the launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Pitching downrange.
20 minutes after the booster landed, the second stage restarted and sent Turksat 5 Bravo into its eccentric geostationary transfer orbit. Over the next few months, the satellite will circularize at GEO altitude and zero its inclination using its onboard electric engines. After separation, the SpaceX webcast stayed on air for a few minutes to show views of the Earth from the second stage camera, which was quite special. We don't usually see views of Earth at this altitude. Turksat 5 Bravo is the second in a series of dual-use civilian and military satellites for the Republic of Turkey. 25% of the satellite was built in Turkey, specifically the 3 X-band transponders intended for government use. The satellite weighs 4.5 metric tons at launch, which is half the weight of a T-Rex. Electric propulsion allows smaller satellites to launch on the Falcon 9 to a regular geostationary transfer orbit and still permit SpaceX to recover that first stage. The trade-off is that the satellite spends much more of its time getting on station, months instead of weeks, because the engines produce much less thrust. It also spends more time passing through Earth's radiation belts, which increases the risk of damage to its electronics and degrades the solar panels. Turksat 5 Bravo is expected to last up to 35 years. After the break, another Falcon 9 launch.
From one payload, which will be active for a third of a century, to one which will only be in space for a month or so. On December 21st at 10:07 UTC, a SpaceX Falcon 9 launched the CRS-24 resupply mission towards the International Space Station from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, SpaceX's 31st and final mission of 2021, which used capsule C209 on its second flight. Let's watch the launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition.
Liftoff. Cargo Dragon soars with the final supply run in 2021 for the astronauts aboard the International Space Station.
Downrange.
Like most of the CRS missions SpaceX flew in 2021, the first stage for this mission was a brand new booster, Booster 1069. The last maiden flight of a booster was B-1067, which first flew on CRS-22 6 months ago in June 2021. Booster 1069 landed about 9 minutes after launch on the drone ship just to read the instructions, marking this the 100th successful landing of a Falcon 9 booster 6 years to the day from the first one. As usual, CRS-24 brings with it lots of science and station equipment. There are too many to talk about in the time that we have, so here are a few of our favorites.
One experiment being brought up by CRS-24 is laundry detergent. I know, laundry is boring. It's a hard, thankless task that never ends. But at least here on Earth, we can do our laundry. Currently, astronauts on the International Space Station do not wash their clothes. They can't. The process would use so much precious water, and the existing filtration system simply wouldn't be able to get that water clean enough for humans to drink. Instead, crew members wear the same item of clothing several times and then throw it out with the rest of the space station's trash by burning it up in the atmosphere. For future missions beyond Earth orbit, astronauts may not be capable of getting fresh new clothes on a regular basis, so they will need the ability to do laundry. Procter & Gamble's cleverly named PG Tide experiment has two objectives: to determine the efficacy of the active ingredient amine oxide on stain removal in microgravity, and to see if any part of the detergent's enzymes or surfactants become inactive or break down and become less effective with extended time in microgravity. To test how effective amine oxide is in space, the astronauts will first stain and then clean cotton swatches using Tide pens and Tide to-go wipes. They will also clean swatches that were stained on the ground. The second part of the experiment is much simpler. Detergent samples will be brought up to the station and stored for 6 months. The astronauts will take pictures of the samples at various points to track changes like cloudiness or color. Both parts of the experiment will be returned to the ground at the same time.
The bioprint first aid experiment will demonstrate the use of bio-ink bandages from an astronaut's own cells, which ensures that the body won't reject it while accelerating the healing process. It also has the benefit of avoiding potential allergic reactions to materials in a conventional bandage, such as latex or adhesive. Bioprint first aid will allow an astronaut to treat themselves quickly without relying on ground-based medical support. The completely mechanical device can make a personalized patch in only 10 minutes. The purpose of this initial demonstration is to see how, quote, the distribution pattern of the printed samples on Earth compares to the printed samples in space. The first demonstration of the technology won't contain human cells or be used directly on an astronaut's body. Instead, the astronaut will strap foil to their arm or leg and then use the bioprinter to apply a simulated patch to the foil. My favorite experiment is the ESA-sponsored concrete hardening experiment. It will investigate how cement mixed with different aggregates, from sand to simulated lunar regolith, affects how the resulting concrete hardens in microgravity. Concrete is the most common building material and the second most used substance in the world after water. The right concrete for a particular application is a balance between its three major ingredients: aggregate, cement, and water. Aggregate in this context is simply material such as crushed rock, sand, or even old concrete that provides the structure for cement to bind together, creating a matrix for everything to bond to. The optimal ratio for particular concrete depends on cost and the required strength of the material. If there's not enough water, not all the aggregate will bind to the cement, reducing its strength. Too much water, and the concrete strength is reduced because of pores in the material that lets water permeate. Too much cement, and it has lower strength, and it is more expensive because cement requires a lot of energy to produce. Too much aggregate, and the concrete is hard to pour and brittle when cured. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that. There are different kinds of aggregate for different uses, but this is a show about rockets, not civil engineering. Determining how concrete hardens in space will be essential to building large permanent structures on other solar system bodies. Using readily available local materials instead of bringing materials with the mission will allow much more science to get done. Once the concrete is cured in space, it'll be brought back to Earth for analysis, focusing on its pore microstructure and mechanical strength. CRS-24 also brings up the CubeSats of NASA's Ilana 38 mission, a few CubeSats from JAXA, and two payloads which will be mounted to the outside of the Kibo module. To read more about the experiments on CRS-24, you can check out the links in the show notes, and Patreon supporters can check out the bonus content for the show too. In total, CRS-24 brought up 2,989 kilograms of cargo, including packing material, 2,081 in the capsule, and 908 in the trunk. After the break, a sea story in this week in rocket history.
Instead of a mission or spacecraft event like normal, to wrap up the year, we felt it was appropriate to talk about the uniquely North American tradition of NORAD tracking Santa. The story starts on Christmas Eve 1948 when the U.S. military alerted the public to the activities of one unidentified sleigh. 7 years later, in 1955, a Sears advertisement in Colorado invited children to call Santa day and night, and he'd personally respond. But the phone number that was printed didn't ring a phone at the North Pole. Thanks to a typo in the ad, callers were instead connected to the phone on Colonel Harry Shop's desk at the Continental Air Defense Command. According to an interview with Colonel Shop's children, a child dialed the misprinted number and asked if he was talking to Santa. The colonel thought it was a joke at first, which made the child cry. Realizing what had happened, he quickly played along with the child. The calls kept coming, so a few airmen were assigned to answer the phone to act like Santa Claus. When Colonel Shop went into work on Christmas Eve, he was greeted by a drawing of Santa's sleigh on a map, which was probably created by a bored airman that was also on duty that night. Instead of ordering the airman to take it down, Shop called a local radio station to report an unidentified flying object that looked like a sleigh. That quickly led to radio stations calling him asking for updates on Santa's location. Colonel Shop apparently had no intention of making this an annual tradition, but decided to keep it up after the Associated Press called asking for Santa updates. When NORAD was founded as a combined agency of the United States and Canada in 1958, the organization continued the tradition. Over the years, the methods of announcing the progress of Santa's annual journey changed. In 1999, the NORAD Santa Tracker website was set up, providing a live map showing Santa's whereabouts. In 2008, Santa's progress started being announced on Twitter via NORAD Santa. And it's not just computer technology that is used. All of NORAD's military assets are used to track and escort Santa as he travels over North America, including fighter jet escorts by both Canadian and American military jets as he makes his trip. Fortunately for the jets, Santa slows down so they can escort him. Even the spaceborne sensors located in a geosynchronous orbit are used. These satellites have infrared sensors, meaning they can see heat. When a rocket or missile is launched, a tremendous amount of heat is produced, enough for the satellites to see them. It turns out that Rudolph's nose gives off an infrared signature similar to a missile launch, so the satellites can detect Rudolph's bright red nose with no problems. In 2020 and again in 2021, the years when COVID-19 pandemic has caused so many things to be canceled, the NORAD Santa Tracker continues to operate unaffected. If you want to see where Santa is on Christmas Eve, you can visit www.noradsanta.org with your parents. After the break, we'll be back with our weekly statistics and random space fact. Stay tuned.
To wrap things up, here's a running tally of a few spaceflight statistics for the current year. Toilets currently in space, 8. 4 installed on the ISS, 1 on the Crew Dragon, 1 on the Soyuz, 1 on Shenzhou, and 1 on Tianhe. Total 2021 orbital launch attempts, 136, including 10 failures. Total satellites from launches, 1,713. We keep track of orbital launches by where they are launched from, also known as spaceport. Here's that breakdown. China, 51. USA, 45. Kazakhstan, 13. Russia, 9. French Guiana, 6. New Zealand, 6. Japan, 2. India, 2. Iran, 1. South Korea, 1. Your random space fact is that a geologist's hammer was left on the moon. Apollo 17 astronaut Jack Schmitt, the only professional geologist to set foot on the moon, threw his rock hammer away from the lunar lander during an EVA. Because it's almost Christmas, we can watch this together.
Go ahead. Oh, poor little head. Let me throw the hammer. Okay? Let me throw the hammer. Please. It's all yours. You got the You deserve it. A hammer thrower, you're a geologist, you ought to be able to throw it. You ready? Go ahead. You ready for this? Ready for this? Yeah. Don't hit the lem. Or the out step. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Beautiful. Looked like it was going a million miles, but it really didn't. Didn't it?
This has been The Daily Space. You can find more information on all our stories, including images, at dailyspace.org. As always, we're here thanks to the donations of people like you. If you like our content, please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/CosmoQuestX or visit cosmoquest.org to learn how you can make a year-end tax-deductible donation. Thank you.